Welcome back to another episode of the AfterHours podcast. I'm your host, Francisco. Co-host today, I have Daniel, and we are joined with Tom Schroeder from Waldmann Brewery out in St. Paul, Minnesota. What's going on, man?
Hey, guys. Great to be here.
Yeah, thanks for coming on the show. I know your day's been a little stressful, but glad you still had some time for us, and we're excited.
Well, I'm glad to be here. This will be the least stressful part of my day, so I'm savoring it.
It's always good to hear, yeah.
Yeah. So, Tom, you are the proprietor and founder of Waldmann Brewery, correct?
That's correct.
Nice. So let's get a little bit of your story from the beginning. When did you guys open, and how did it start?
Well, it begins long before we opened. How long do we have?
It's up to you.
The story all begins actually in 1992, believe it or not, when my wife and I first moved to this part of St. Paul. It's the oldest neighborhood in the city of St. Paul. We essentially homesteaded here in a modern sense of the word. We restored a pretty derelict early 19th century house or mid 19th century house. Really fell in love with the neighborhood and the potential of the neighborhood. There was a lot of revitalization going on at the time. And at the time, I spotted this odd duck limestone building. It was right across the alley from our house. It was occupied at the time, but clearly hadn't been cared for decades or more than a century, and was really pretty unique. Solid limestone walls, right out at the street line, kind of primitive Federalist style architecture, if you could call it that, but fairly vernacular building. And here in St. Paul, when most of our buildings are late 19th century at the oldest, this thing was clearly mid 19th century, possibly earlier. Some said it was one of the oldest structures in the city, and I'm kind of a curious guy. We were into restoration work anyway. I took a photograph of this building, and I, under a pretext to meet the owner, I wrapped it in gift wrap, brought it over, knocked on the door, and waited. Finally, an elderly woman slowly creaked the door open and greeted me, and what followed was about a 2-hour visit and an impromptu tour of one of the, I'll say, best preserved, but what I really mean is nobody had remodeled what turns out to have been the only surviving Civil War saloon in the Twin Cities, one of the few in the state, and the oldest commercial building in the city of St. Paul that this woman was living in, had been living in for about 60 years now by herself. And I fell in love with the building immediately. Flash forward more than 20 years. Lights are off in the building. Trash is piling up. Building is becoming vandalized. City places it on what amounts to a demolition list, what we call locally here the vacant building list. And I stepped in, negotiated the purchase with some of the descendants of the woman I'd met over 20 years earlier. And we began a 10-year restoration process of the Twin Cities' only surviving Civil War saloon, but now reopening it ultimately in 2017 as a, you could call it a brew pub euphemistically, but our formal license is as a brewery. But we also, as was the case with these kinds of establishments, we also serve food. We brew our own beer. That's not the case of the building historically, but we added that business element. And now in our 4th year of operation, we have 60,000 plus visits a year at what is a designated historic site, and I'm having a great time, except for today.
Yeah, that's really awesome. And one of the really cool things that I've saw when going through your website is about how your branding really stays true to, well, the brand of the building. Can you talk a little bit about Waldmann Brewery's brand?
Yeah, no, I appreciate you raising that, because the greatest asset we have is the building's authenticity and its history. And our branding is true to that. I hesitate even to call it branding, because branding to some extent sort of connotes an artifice that we hang on an idea that really imbues some truth that wasn't originally there, if I can give it a crass spin. But in fact, our brand comes directly from the name of the original proprietor, Anton Waldmann. And even the font of our brand comes from a stencil that was found in the backlot archaeology prior to our opening. One of Waldmann's original sign stencils, which we cleaned up and created our own font and brand image for. So So our brand is our history.
That's very cool. I mean, I like it a lot. Also, the logo is pretty cool. The cross W, and it looks like it's like iron plated. So that's pretty dope.
Well, and admittedly, that is a creation of our own, and that's to be credited to a brilliant branding firm that we used at the time, a small shop here in St. Paul, Whittier, if I can insert their name. They deserve full credit for that, and that is an example of how good design can really highlight that authenticity without creating artifice from it.
Yeah, when we first came across Waldmann Brewery, we were actually looking through some Kickstarters, and yours was like one of the first logos that stuck out. We were like, whoa, that looks really cool. What is that? And we clicked on it and learned more about you guys, and here we are.
Well, very cool. Yeah, that was a really a huge effort, but a worthwhile effort. It really created community for the business from the get-go. The outpouring of support that we got in that Kickstarter at all levels, not just the large monetary levels, but kids were mailing in $5, $3, whatever. I was mailing out nails, square nails from the project in recognition of those gifts, all largely symbolic. But it really it started us off with a neighborhood party, so to speak.
That was pretty cool, and it was one of the most successful Kickstarters that I've ever seen, especially in like the brewery and the food and beverage space. Whose idea was it, and who orchestrated all of the tiers and the donations and the rewards and stuff?
Oh, I had several friends help with all of that, and we had the benefit of the experiences of others that had gone through the Kickstarter process. I'm not even sure that that's a viable pathway any longer, particularly for startup breweries. But we were never just a startup brewery. It was more of a crusade to save a historic structure and to build community by using the history of the site and the brewery business model to make it financially viable.
Yeah, that's pretty sweet. That's pretty unique as well. Not too often you see that.
Mm-hmm.
So, what does your guys' selection of brews look like these days?
We're sticking to our original brew philosophy of classic German and Central European style lagers. About 90% of what we do are lagers, but right now we just issued a Kolsch today, so it's a North German ale, as you probably know.
Mm-hmm.
And so at the moment, if you take a snapshot of our beer menu, we've got our Radler, our Kolsch, our Maibach is just about running out, but it's still on tap. We've got a Bach that is even closer to running out, actually, from February from our Bach Fest. Our Pilsner, which is our flagship beer, it's just a great German American style Pilsner. And let me see what else. Oh, and our Dunkel. My current favorite is the Dunkel.
Okay. And when you guys first had opened, you guys had most of those on the same list, correct?
We have those on the same list. You mean on the beer menu?
Yeah, on the beer menu. Most of those have stood the test of time.
Oh, you know what? Oh, you're asking have we consistently had that mix of beers? And actually, yes. I think our core would be our Pilsner, our Wiener, which is our Viennese style lager, and the Dunkel. But we've certainly, we're increasing the diversity of our styles. There are well over 400 different German beer styles and variations between and betwixt all of those. So, we're a small place. We'll brew, if we're lucky, 750 barrels this year. We don't have the throughput to change it up every week. So with a 14-barrel brewery, that means we've got any given style on tap for upwards of a month and a half or more. But over time, you'll see about a 65 to 75% change rate on our beers in the course of a year. In other words, seeing mostly all new beers every year, with the exception of our three cores.
Okay, cool. What is one thing you wish you had known when you had started out in the brewing industry that you now know?
Oh, wow. So many things, from the micro to the macro. On the micro scale, there are little things like the importance of cropping your own yeast. We started out, we've got a very unique brew system that is designed specifically by and for us. Creveller assembled the components, but it's a decoction style brew system. And part of that brew philosophy was to use horizontal fermentation to reduce the hydrostatic pressure on our yeast beds, since we're using long duration lagering beers, and the water table pressure on that yeast bed is a potential flavor detractor. But the consequence of horizontal fermentation is it's really, really difficult to crop and reuse yeast. And that's one of the most expensive parts of the whole recipe, $600 a batch. So on the micro level, I wish we'd gotten vertical fermenters sooner. We just took shipment last week of 2 new fermenters, and they are both vertical. So now we're going to our own in-house yeast cropping and production process, and that'll save us. We'll pay for those new fermenters in about a year and a half. And they were $20,000 fermenters, so that'll tell you how much we're saving in yeast. On a macro level, people told me having food would complicate the business model, and it's not like I disbelieve them. But seriously, guys, running a restaurant is like managing a high school play. I mean, it is insanely dramatic, chaotic. The turnover in staff is never ending. It's, when the people are talking, the glasses are clicking, the staff are running. It's an adrenaline rush on a Saturday night. You don't get that from just running a beer hall. It's a full composite of the beer and the food and the full experience. But I don't know. The food part of the model is really, really complicated, and I totally underappreciated that when we started.
So what's your favorite part about running Waldmann Brewery?
The brewery. I keep telling my head brewer this, and I don't know that he believes me anymore, but standing next to him and helping him, he's brewing a new batch of Pilsner right now. I'd dearly love to be there. I love everything about the brew process. Even the mash out, the grain out, the smells, everything about it. I don't know. It's weird. It's kind of like baking bread with too much water. It's just awesome. And then you've got the magic of the fermentation itself, and people's taking pleasure in it with friends at the table. That is by far the most rewarding. I'm not trying to take over the world. This is not a business plan that's designed to be replicated on every street corner. I just care about what happens at Waldmann and in the confines of this unique set of spaces in this unique neighborhood, and just pulling off the project to begin with is hugely satisfying. I still pinch myself that we were able to do this, because I was told from the get-go, we didn't have the zoning. We had, crap for structure. The space is awkward. Any restaurateur would look at this space and say, this can't be done. And, now we're probably going to top 120,000 in revenue this year. Excuse me, $1.2 million in revenue, 120,000 this month alone. And that's from a piece of rubble that was almost demolished by the city.
That is absolutely incredible. It's pretty known that in the food and beverage industry, there's pretty slim margins. Does it help being a brewery that's more focused on the beverage side as opposed to a restaurant, in terms of keeping your profit margins relatively high?
Yeah, it does. It definitely does. The food cost is much higher than the brewery cost, so the margins are much slimmer on the food side. On the other hand, you really can't separate the two that much. I keep telling both the chef and the brewer, you guys really need each other. Brewer thinks he's genius because he's producing $7 pints of beer with a few cents of ingredients and a lot of hard work and time. But truth be told, that beer might not have been purchased if someone wasn't sitting down with a great plate of food to go with it. And and the ambiance that Waldmann can provide. So it's a total picture. But yes, about 45 to 47% of our revenue is on the beer side, and that is the highest margin revenue that we have. The only exception to that is our distributed beer is an even tighter revenue, tighter margin than our food. In fact, our distributed beer is almost not profitable at all. We kind of look at that as marketing value more than anything else, name recognition.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I never really thought about it that way, because I always knew just from all of our previous interviews that the food industry, it tends to be a little more narrow than with the like the brewery industry, but the way that they kind of work with each other, it kind of works out in that way. This is probably a really bad analogy, but it's kind of like when you go to the movie theater, you're not making a lot of the money from the movies. You're making a lot of the money from like the popcorn and the pop, just because like the two and two go really well together, and it costs so much to get the movie, but then it doesn't cost as much to get the popcorn and all the food and all that. And then like when you go to a movie theater, you're going to want some popcorn and pop.
In fact, we're going to be bringing in wine in September. We're renewing our license, getting a wine license as well. And our brewer is fully appreciative of the fact that we are probably going to sell more beer as a result of getting a wine license. Ironically, more parties that have at least one wine drinker in them will come to Waldmann, and the rest will drink beer.
Where did you find this statistic?
Well, so partly through talking to some of our brew pub peers in the community that have beer and wine licenses, and looking at their percentage of sales and the demographics of their customers. A lot of it's anecdotal, talking to some of our own customers, and I've been raising this question more and more as we've decided on this new business model, including a wine license. And a lot of them have said flat out, "Hey, I'd bring my wife, or we'd come with this other couple if only you guys had wine." But we've self-selected a narrow channel of patrons who aren't, inherently exclusive of beer drinkers. There's no reason fewer beer drinkers should come. It's just an additive by allowing the few in the party that would choose wine to join them also.
I mean, it makes sense. And it's like you said, I mean, not everybody is into beer. So I think it's really good that you can diversify a little bit and then have more to your offerings, obviously attracting, more patrons that way. And just to go back, it's not that I didn't believe you. It did sound anecdotal. So like, I was just wondering if there was like some concrete evidence, but I mean, it makes sense just because, I mean, I know plenty of people, especially like a lot of my friends that are female, they would rather go somewhere that serves wine than just beer. So I understand. And what would you say is your least favorite part about operating Waldmann Brewery?
There are difficult parts. I hesitate to call them least favorable or unfavorable. I mean, the difficulties are mostly around personnel. The difficulty in hiring, particularly in this market right now, is making it really tough. In the churn of personnel, there's a burden on the business in terms of the resources we put into training and retraining again and again and again. And it's also, frankly, draining on a psychological level. How many coworkers do you want to see come and go, and still, those friendships coming and going with them, and still come to work at the same place every day. I know we haven't had greater personnel turnover than our peers in the industry, but I've just learned that this is endemic to this industry, and it raises larger issues that I wish we were capable of tackling by ourselves, but issues like just the sustainability of the lifestyles in this industry, with non-sustainable wages, a lack of health benefits for the most part. I fundamentally believe beer and food is underpriced in this country because customers are getting it on the backs of service workers who are for the most part underpaid and underbenefited. We are starting a benefits program at Waldmann. I think we're probably, when I talk to our benefits consultant, we're one of the smallest employers in the Twin Cities to even consider offering healthcare benefits. I mean, just to place this in perspective, I've got 23 biological units as employees now, 16 and a half FTEs. We're a tiny business. I probably have sounded more grandiose than our numbers would reflect in this conversation. That's just because I'm excited about Waldmann, but it's astounding to me how the value people get from dining and don't appreciate the real cost of that in terms of the non-sustainability of the workforce serving them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is no secret that the food and beverage industry has one of the highest turnover rates. So that is not a major surprise, but then also, I mean, I don't know how much of an impact COVID had, just because it is an industry that was hit, one of the most hard by the fact that you couldn't be in person serving food and beverage. So I don't know if that relates at all, but it is definitely not an easy industry to supplement a competent staff at all times.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, we could consume the entire time talking about COVID, but we're all healthy in our organization. I'm so pleased that among our workforce, a lot of people got it, but everyone recovered. We're here. I'm super grateful for that, and more than anything else, our patrons stayed with us. We stayed open throughout COVID. We mixed up the business models 2 or 3 times, created some business channels we never knew existed. Our patrons were faithful throughout, even to the extent that, and I chuckle because, we were zipped out on the second round of CARES Act funding because we did so well through the shutdown. I'm not bragging about that, but that's a barometer of how supported we were by our patrons during COVID, that we did not suffer the level of losses necessary to get COVID relief in the second round. We did in the first round, but not in the second.
How did you guys get creative during those times?
Oh, home delivery beer. I'm still not sure if that was legal, but it worked. We created a food subscription program. You could sign up on a weekly or monthly basis for Waldmann meals that came this is not to-go food, but ready to heat and serve in your own home, with accompanying video plating instructions from our chef and a little chef talk to chef up your plate. And we had live stream music. We took our musicians, sustained them through COVID by doing hosted live streams from Waldmann, and I did little commercial pitches and to keep connected with our supporters, and just all sorts of strange and amazing things. And the most painful part was the number of employees we did have to lay off. We've brought them all back, at least all those that wanted to come back. The layoffs were super painful, but we survived and came back, and everybody who's wanted employment and some have gotten it.
It's incredible, really. I mean, that's wild that you were actually able to bring everybody back, and hopefully now we're getting toward the end of COVID. I think, what is it, more than 40% of adults in America have at least one of the 2 vaccines. So yeah, I mean, hopefully things return back to normal soon. I don't really know.
I know Ohio, June 2nd is like the big day where things are going to start to go back to normal. I don't know if it's different up in where you're at.
Yeah, we have inside dining restrictions of 75% capacity, which is up from a 25% limit several months ago. 6-foot distancing, masks, of course. Outside, though, just last week they deleted all restrictions with respect to outside. So no space, no distancing, no masks, no total capacity restrictions. And we have a very large beer garden. Bulk of our revenue in the summertime comes from that beer garden. In fact, bulk of our revenue all winter long came from the beer garden. We installed 500,000 BTUs in heat, radiant heat, on the beer garden, and that's really kept us alive. So yeah, we're looking good in Minnesota. We're 62% of the total adult population eligible for a vaccine have received a vaccine.
Yeah, that's pretty solid. I don't know. things are just going to keep going upward, hopefully, and more things will keep opening up. So that'll be good. And obviously, with minimum restrictions on outside dining, we can only hope that one day indoor dining will also be the same.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that is the hope. In terms of a beer garden, how does that operate different than the brewery itself, or is it one and the same essentially?
Oh, it's I mean, all part of the business, obviously, and certainly part of the historic operating model. Anton Waldmann did have a beer garden. I haven't talked about this very much in our conversation, but we're not just a Civil War saloon, we're a Civil War German lager beer saloon. These were a phenomenon around the country. Ohio was heavily populated by Germans, so I know you had them in Cincinnati, Toledo, Cleveland as well. But German lager saloons really centered around the beer garden in the summertime. It's part of the German outdoor ethic, the hunting ethic, the family ethic, because these were also family gathering spaces. Unlike the Yankee saloons where the guy'd go in there and throw back the jigger of whiskey or whatever and go out like a rocket. These were places to dwell, listen to music. They had all sorts of crazy entertainments like lawn bowling and balloon rides. In one famous case, in a German lager saloon in St. Paul, they offered balloon rides from the beer garden across the Mississippi River. I don't think our insurance would cover that. So ours is a traditional crushed marble limestone surface with large, I hesitate to call them picnic tables because they're specially designed, but cedar wood tables that resemble a picnic table. They seat up to 15 people each. Lots of beer barrels from our barrel storage program that we've topped off with tables. So if you come on our beer garden in the summertime, 3 nights a week, you'll hear live music, people under the umbrellas, quaffing the Pilsner, food being run out, starlight at night. We've got the stoves burning as well. We had up to 4 solo stoves burning this winter, so sometimes there's really pleasant firelight. It's really ironically, I talk a lot about the history of the building, but the beer garden is the most captivating locale in the seasonable months.
Heck yeah, I'm looking at it right now from a photo on Instagram, and it looks like a great time. It looks really really sweet. The tables themselves are massive, as you said, so plenty of people can gather around and have a good time. So it looks pretty sweet.
One question I had: so if it's my first time going to Waldmann Brewery, what should be my first go-to plate of food, and what should be my go-to beverage?
That's a tough one. We intentionally have a more focused menu. You're not going to find a wrong direction on our menu in terms of what pairs well with our beer. But if you really want the core Waldmann experience, you're probably going to get our currywurst with our cream potato sides and our fermented cabbage wedge to go with it. All of that's plated together on a period mid-19th century flow blue plate. Looks wonderful, and you'll get that Willie Becker half liter of I would say our flagship Pilsner would be the place to start, because that Pilsner embodies everything about our brew philosophy. The German noble hops, which anchor us to German brewing traditions and ingredients, but also the American cluster hop, which some brewers regard as sort of the ditch hop of the United States. It's the ditch hop because it was the original hop used by brewers and got way out of control on the East Coast. But that was the hop we know that was used by Midwestern brewers, and by Midwestern, I'm including Ohio, in the 19th century when Otsego County, New York was the source of almost all of the brewers' hop demands in the then settled parts of this country. So that beer is a wonderful amalgam of the Waldmann philosophy and taste experience, and pairs really well with the currywurst.
For sure, I'll have to try that out. Another question I had: how's Oktoberfest?
Yeah, no, it's our biggest event of the year. Obviously, we are German American by the so that makes sense. It In the past, I asked whether you're referring to this year or other years. Obviously, we had to substantially revamp Oktoberfest for 2020. We did conduct an Oktoberfest, but it was a seated event. There were assigned seats. Our beer garden capacity was severely limited. Interestingly, what we found out, and the entertainment was the same, everything else was the same. It was just that people were seated, spaced at those banquet tables and bistro tables throughout the beer garden. And what we found was, and here's where I'm going to sound like a crass businessman, we went from average tickets of, $11 to $14 to average tickets of $50 or $60, depending on the day of Oktoberfest. And even though our capacity was only a quarter of what it had been in previous years, the people that attended, I think, genuinely had a better time. They had all the entertainment. They had better food, quite frankly. It wasn't just a foil brat in your hand. You sat, you dined, you enjoyed, you watched the music, the dancers, appropriately distanced. You laughed at the Maskrugsteinem, the Stein holding competition, the yodeling competition, etc. Our Oktoberfests have been very family oriented. They're not a drunk fest. We're trying to get away from stereotypes of other Oktoberfests, and I think we've succeeded in doing so. And so, what 2021 will be, I think, will be an amalgam of both approaches. It's another way in which, COVID was horrible in almost every respect, but we did learn some important things from it as well.
Absolutely. I was looking at the Oktoberfest on your website. So it looks like this is a 3-day ordeal you guys have here, right? And it's the entire weekend.
Yep.
It's the entire weekend. And then do you guys serve any special food or drinks to go along with the commemorative celebration?
Oh yeah. No, we so obviously shock, right? The special drink is our Oktoberfest beer. But in all seriousness,
Yeah.
Adam Weiss, our head brewer, brews an amazing Marzen style Oktoberfest. And we've tweaked that recipe a little bit over the years, but it's fabulous. We typically also will brew a fest beer. It's a little bit drier, higher ABV. It is the official Munich Oktoberfest beer, and for a reason. It's the most quaffable beer on earth. And in terms of special foods, we do go to aside from this last year when we did formal seated dining for our Oktoberfest during COVID, we've generally had more handhelds, a pocket strudel, our fully loaded verse, fully loaded pretzels, and a few other variants of handhelds.
How long do you guys serve the Oktoberfest throughout the year?
Well, that's a great question too, because not intentionally, but we in the last 2 years we've run out of the Oktoberfest on either the last day of the festival or the day following. It's been uncanny how close a call we've had, and none of that was intentional because people have loved it, and I wished it would have lasted through October, but it rarely has. This year we're with the 2 new fermenters we just increased our storage capacity in one week by 25%. So this year we're going to brew probably a double batch of the Oktoberfest, probably another single of the fest beer, and that'll get us through October.
Okay. Can't wait to try it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I hope you guys would come out here.
We have to now. I can't miss out on this.
I think so.
Yeah. And if you weren't operating Waldmann Brewery, what do you see yourself doing? What could you see yourself doing beyond this industry?
My dark secret I haven't shared yet is I am an attorney.
Oh no!
And yeah, I'm sorry. I just like confessing I was a vampire, but no, I'm an innocent healthcare attorney. My other job and my job for the last 30 years has been working with a law firm specializing in the field of healthcare transactions and regulatory work. I know that doesn't mean much to anyone other than those that work in the healthcare regulatory sphere, but no. So Waldmann was actually a huge right turn in my career. I ended up stepping down from the partnership at the firm. That's a position that you go to law school, you work your ass off for 9 years to achieve partnership. You're an owner of the firm. You've reached all of your dreams, and then you become a owner of a brewery. No, I mean that never happens. But for me, I'm going to sound super corny here, but I'm going to say it anyway. This became a calling for me. I was hell bent to reopen Waldmann. It also conveniently combined all of my most passionate hobbies of brewing. I was a home brewer for all the decades I was an attorney. Historic preservation. I did a lot of pro bono historic preservation work as an attorney. I've sued more people for tearing down buildings than you might believe. And then just the restoration work itself, to be able to take this building back. Plus, it houses my extensive beer stein collection, which is something my wife loves. They're out of the house now.
It's very appealing. See what I did there? Appealing? No?
Like
appeal? No,
okay, I get it.
No, crickets. Sorry.
Well, that's cool. I did not know that about you, but now I'll be super careful around you. I won't, dot my I's and cross my T's.
You would be astonished how little I do that resembles most people's stereotype of what a lawyer does.
I had no idea. You had me convinced up until this moment. So
yeah.
You play it off very well.
All right. One question I got, because you are an older, your establishment is in an older building. Is there any good ghost stories?
I've been getting repeated emails from the Paranormal Society. They want to do some sort of an audit of the building and tell me all of the spirits that reside in it, which I'm sort of scared to do because it would be kind of weird to find out there were spirits, and B, what do you tell the customers? We've had weird stories actually in the last year of people sitting in the beer garden at night and asking me who the shirtless man is in the window on the second level.
Oh, no.
And there is no one on the second level.
Oh, that was actually me. Sorry.
Yeah, right. Nice. I get that one a lot better than the appeal one, but anyway.
Okay, good.
No, but there have been stories, and staff have played them up to some extent. I opened the door to the basement one morning, and somebody had put a big poster of a ghost on the other side, scared me half to death, and it was a Halloween joke. But no, I think we're free of all evil spirits, and whether there are beneficial ones, I don't know that we'll ever know.
Okay. Yeah, we've had previous guests that have talked about the ghosts and the spirits that quote unquote haunt their establishment, but they're all they're not really haunting them. They're just friendly ghosts that would just move around chairs or play a beat or music. So nothing too malicious I've seen from the spirits so far. They all seem to be just relaxing, having a couple brews, having a good time.
Yeah, I think one actually tipped one of the bartenders even.
Yep.
Nice.
What would you say is the most thrill-seeking thing that you've ever done?
Well, aside from opening this business, boy, that's a tough one. No one's ever asked me that. Just because I'm not, if you knew me, you'd know that would be kind of a waste to ask, because I'm not really a thrill seeker. I have done a bit of sailing over the years. I love sailing in Lake Superior, and I don't know if you guys are familiar with the 1999 Green Storm, but I was out on a boat during the Green Storm, facing near 20-foot waves on a 32-foot chartered sailboat, and with my pregnant wife. And I swore to myself, I am not in life for adventure. I want to live. And if I live through this adventure, I will never be a thrill seeker again. So I'm not a mountain climber. I'm not, I'm not Buckaroo Banzai. I'm not trying to break any land speed records. I don't do brain surgeries, but Waldmann is pretty white knuckle. This is, to return to the theme, a lot of breweries are hurting now. This used to be the easy business model, and COVID didn't make it any easier. And you add to that the thin margins in the restaurant industry and the personnel issues we've already discussed. And this is not a rational thing for anyone to do, particularly when they might otherwise be doing pretty well in another profession.
Well, I know you're a busy man, and we'll start to wrap up the show here. But first, can you leave our listeners with one piece of life advice that you'd like to give them?
Be kind. We always meet again.
That's true. The world's a small place.
It's a good one.
All right. And where can people find you on social media or on your website or in person?
Waldmann Brewery on any media format. In person, I'm at tom@waldmannbrewery.com. And remember the two N's in Waldman.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tom. It's been a pleasure, and hope to see you soon at Oktoberfest.
Oh, thank you both. Thank you for including me on the show, guys. I really appreciate it.
All right, After Hours Nation, we hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you'd like to stay updated, you can check out our site at afterhourscast.com. Don't forget to tune in next Tuesday morning for our next episode. After Hours Nation, stay thirsty, my friends.